instruction, upon whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your strength. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. Therefore, my beloved, shun the worship of idols. I speak as to sensible men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one bread. We who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Dawson. Would you join me in a moment of prayer? Most gracious and holy God, we give you thanks for this day. And we ask that you use us as your vessels. Help us to share your love in every way we can. Open our hearts and our minds that we may truly hear and receive the word that you have for us this day. Amen. Now, I know it seems like you're at the end of your rope, but don't worry. God won't give you any more than you can handle. I wonder how many times we've heard that. I wonder maybe if we've said that as a possible comfort. And it may provide a comfort for someone and a measure of hope for someone particularly going through something very difficult, a really huge trial. As part of our continuing sermon series today, we're looking at this particular half-truth. God won't give you more than you can handle. Now, the problem with this half-truth comes from the context of the scripture that Dawson read for us. And actually, Julie read it as well. But when we look at the issues facing this church in Corinth, the Corinthian church, and let me just tell you, this church was messed up in every way. It was a messed up church. But when we look at the issues that were facing this particular church, we kind of get an understanding of what Paul was talking about and referring to in his letter. But we do need to understand what was going on in the area of Corinth in AD 51, right about the time that Paul was writing this letter, to understand that Paul was referring to temptation, not the trials and hardships of everyday life, when he provided these words of assurance to the church in Corinth. Now, understand, Corinth was a large port city with multicultural influences. So if you could just kind of get that in your mind, it was extremely diverse. So hence there were numerous pagan gods that were represented throughout the city. And as part of the worshiping practices towards these pagan gods, things like sexual immorality and animal sacrifices were commonplace. It was a common practice in the area. Temples existed on every street corner. Sounds like a church on every corner that we have here today. But temptations abounded without a doubt. Now, when you and I sit down to a meal today, those of us who are not vegetarian or vegan often have meat as a staple that is a part of our meals. However, in Paul's time, meat was quite a luxury. If folks purchased meat at the local market, chances are it came from an animal that was sacrificed during one of these pagan rituals. So Paul's message to the church facing these daily temptations was this half-truth. God won't give you more than you can handle. But he was specifically referring to temptation, and God always providing a way for us to overcome and endure our temptations. Paul, in fact, was not referring to our trials and hardships of everyday life. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an example of this. I just recently visited my mother up in Pennsylvania to help her out for the weekend. She was not feeling well on this particular Saturday, and so I fixed breakfast. So I had full control over what we ate for breakfast that morning. That's an important piece to remember in this story. And at this time, I'm back on my restrictive diet that doesn't allow me to eat any starches. And remember, like I said, I'm the one preparing I have full control over this process, okay? And I noticed that my mother had a can of Pillsbury Graham biscuits in her refrigerator. And of course, I had to suggest that we have some. Now, my biggest weakness, besides chocolate, is bread of any kind. And so I had a choice, and I in fact heard the voice of God, the nudging of God, saying, don't give in to that temptation. But I chose not to listen. God provided me with a way out of that temptation, and yet God also allows us the freedom of choice. God isn't one to tempt us. We can pretty much handle that one on our own. We can do that one all by ourselves. If I had just left those biscuits in the fridge, if I just left them there. James 1:3 puts it this way. God is not tempted by any evil form, nor does God tempt anyone. Now every week, we recite the Lord's Prayer. We'll do that again today. And some may argue that the words of the Lord's Prayer directly contradict this line of thinking. And the phrasing question is this one: lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It would appear that God is tempting us. However, Hamilton, the author of this series, suggests a different emphasis on that term, lead us. We are asking God to lead us, not into the area of temptation where we're perfectly able to lead ourselves, but to the right path that will keep us from evil. I have no problem leading myself into temptation. I do this all the time. What I need God's help with is showing me the way that is there to overcome my temptation. I guess the biggest one for me is the scale. It's right there. I need God's strength in my times of weakness. And Hamilton puts it this way: the problem isn't that God fails to provide a way out of temptation. It's that when the way appears, we usually don't pursue it. Now, some of you might recall the comedian Flip Wilson. Y'all remember him? Some of you, you're all, okay, I see the heads nodding. One of his famous sayings was, "The devil made me do it." He always said that. The Apostle Paul provides us with the reassurance that the devil cannot make you do anything. Resistance is not futile. That's a Star Trek reference. Resistance is not futile, as God provides us with the strength and a path to overcome our temptations. There is no doubt we will be tempted, for the evil one comes to destroy and to steal and to kill. But God provides us with light and life, strength and courage to overcome evil. Amen? Y'all with me today? All right. Now this half-truth misses the mark completely when we talk about or consider the hardships that we encounter. When we tell people that God will not give them any more suffering than they can handle, this may provide some hope, and yet there are many who would challenge this. Have you not felt at one time or another that you had just endured too much? I kind of remember I reached a breaking point in my life when I was facing my 5th surgery in 1 year for a detached retina. 5 surgeries. I pretty much had had enough at that point. If I truly believed that God was giving me this physical ailment, I'd had enough. I'd had enough. The problem with this statement, God won't give you any more than you can handle, is that it credits God with all the suffering that we endure every day. Now, we talked about this when we discussed the first half-truth in this series, and the one that says everything happens for a reason. And if you missed that one, I encourage you to view that one online if you choose. I believe in my heart that God does not cause the suffering and pain that we face, but God does walk with us, providing comfort and strength, often through the help of others. I believe there are times when we cannot handle the hardships we have to face. And that is when Christian community becomes so important. We need God, and we need each other to share our burdens when they become too hard for us to bear alone. Psalm 23 states it this way, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." God assures us that as we face the trials and difficulties of life, God will not abandon us. God will not leave us without hope. God provides a way to overcome our trials through God's unconditional grace and unending love for each of us. None of us can sit here today and not think of the aftermath of the Orlando shootings this past week. And many provided a message from, of all persons, Mr. Rogers. If you all remember Mr. Rogers. But there was a story floating around of how his mother would have him, in a tragic situation like that, when he would hear it or see it on the news when he was a child, his mother would encourage him to look for the helpers, because there were always helpers in these situations. And so it is my prayer that we will be the helpers. And we are going to do something today that hopefully puts us in that, gets us to take that first step. My hope is that we will be that glimmer of hope, reflecting the love of God in all ways. And I wanted to read this scripture from Colossians 3:12-14, because it really sums all this up really nicely. "Therefore, clothe yourself with compassion, with kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." We need God, and we need each other. This week we also celebrate Father's Day. It's a big day, right? Gentlemen, you don't have to grill, do you? Hopefully you get the day off. This celebration came to fruition as Miss Sonora Smart Dodd saw the incredible love and sacrifice of her own father, who raised 5 children on his own after his wife died in childbirth, delivering child number 5. Miss Dodd witnessed firsthand God's provision of help in times of trial, and she wanted to honor her own father for all that he had done for her and for her siblings in the midst of great difficulty. Father's Day has become a day that we not only honor our fathers, but we honor those who step into that role and serve as father figures. And so we honor our stepfathers. We honor uncles and grandfathers, adult male friends. All are honored on Father's Day for the role that you fill. But I wanted to thank all of you who have stepped into this role for a different reason. Not just as provider or mentor or a caregiver or disciplinarian or whatever that role is. I want to thank each of you for serving as a Christian role model for children and for our young people here. It doesn't matter if you're a father or not. If you are fulfilling that role, the children are watching and they're noticing it. So I thank you for your dedication. I thank each of you who recognizes the importance of developing your spiritual health and choosing to live that out in your daily lives. I thank you for helping this church raise up the next generation of believers. That's part of our vision statement. If you're not sure, check the front of your bulletin. I don't think it's a secret that our world's a little bit scary right now. And yet history has taught us that only love can wipe out hate. We are to fight chaos with peace, need with reassurance, hatred with the love of Jesus Christ, who overcame all evil with his death and resurrection. The one who understands our suffering will never leave or forsake us, even in times of hardship and trial. God is with us, now and always. Amen. I didn't mean to scare anyone about what we're going to do today. So just put yourself at ease. All we're going to do is at the end of this service, the bishop would like us to walk outside and say a special prayer for Orlando and for the people there who have suffered so much in the wake of the shootings, the 2 different shootings that happened there, and then also the loss of this child to an alligator attack. It's just so much that this place has endured. And so we want to pray for Orlando. and for the people there that are walking through this dark time. Our prayers mean something. Prayer changes things. Prayer is the biggest powerful weapon we have, and so I want us to utilize that. So, all fears abated? We all good?